Thank you. Hi, I'm the writer, and here's my Virgil in the nuclear world, D. Richard Anderson, or Rip as we call him. He happened to mention that a lot of our nuclear warheads are now being dismantled and their cores will be turned into fuel for nuclear plants. He said 10% of our electricity already comes from former Soviet warheads. That surprised me. And the surprise just was beginning. I didn't know that then. Until that evening, most of what I knew about nuclear energy had come from organizations that opposed nuclear power. I'd marched to ban the bomb in Greenwich Village, and by the way, would march again today in a minute to ban the bomb. And later on, I protested the opening of Shoreham, a nuclear plant on Long Island. I wouldn't do that again.
Last year, I was speaking to a group in Westchester, New York, a group of women. And there was a woman there who had been a nuclear engineer at Shoreham. And she came up to me with a chip on her shoulder because I had protested Shoreham. She said, "You never should have shut Shoreham down." And I said, "Well, I'm really not, to this day I don't know. Even though I'm persuaded of nuclear power being beneficial and that we need it, that particular operation would have been a bad bet if it was a natural gas plant or a coal-fired plant. It's not because it was a nuclear plant, but that just, because of 3 Mile Island, it made the opening of Shoreham that much harder and people much more suddenly aware and suspicious of something they'd sort of taken for granted. Whether a nuclear plant should be sited on Long Island is a whole debate. They say the problem is with evacuation, but Governor Cuomo interrupted the process that was going to occur to test an evacuation plan.
It looked like the NRC was going to issue its final operating license to allow the plant to operate. I think Mario Cuomo and other politicians felt that they should respond to the clamor of the activists and the anti-nuclear people and take measures to abandon the plant.
Virtually everyone agrees that the building, the Shoreham nuclear power plant, has turned out to be a colossal mistake. Peter F. Cohalan, the Suffolk County executive, has sought to block the opening of the plant by refusing to participate in the drafting of an evacuation plan required for licensing by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
And he made a sweetheart financial deal with Wilco. And Wilco took the money and shut down Shoreham.
From the standpoint of Wilco, in those days, because of the deal that Wilco was offered, they couldn't afford not to abandon the plant.
In the second month of his administration, Mr. Cuomo issued a brief but sweeping statement. "I will not be a party to any effort to impose an independently developed state plan on Suffolk County." Mr. Cuomo, who says he personally does not like nuclear power, said in a television interview at the time that the state has no moral or legal responsibility to intervene. Business groups and the Long Island Lighting Company, which argue that the plant, although unfortunate, must open so its cost can be recouped, argued that Mr. Cuomo had effectively given Mr. Cohalan a veto over the plant, allowing the county to lead the state.
So we'll never know about the whether a test of an evacuation plan will report to.
I think, as we look at it today, politicians sort of overestimate what the benefit, what political benefit would be. Because in the long term, we have the governor who took that step is no longer the governor and really has some problems near the tail end.
Mr. Cuomo told the story of the Tsar, the rabbi, and the dog. The Tsar, hostile to the Jewish community, called in the revered and elderly rabbi. The Tsar sought to challenge the rabbi's wisdom by asking him to teach the Tsar's dog to talk. The rabbi, understanding that politically he could not walk away from the Tsar's challenge, replied, "I accept your challenge on the condition that you give me a year."
So even taking that step wasn't enough to push him over the edge or give him a tremendous advantage or popularity that he would want to be able to move on.
You're speaking of Governor Cuomo?
Yeah, Governor Cuomo, yeah. And there were other people who joined, Suffolk County legislators, a whole bunch of people who took negative positions.
Later, the rabbi told his wife and students what he had done, and they asked, "How could you say you can teach the dog to talk?" The rabbi said, "In a year the Tsar could die. In a year the dog could die. In a year, I could teach the dog to talk. The rabbi's point was that some things resolve themselves. Unfortunately, they don't all resolve themselves.
Yeah, I sit here today and I just get intrigued that no one ever makes the connection, because a lot of our problems, the most damaging economic and environmental event ever to affect Long Island throughout its history has been the abandonment of the Shoreham plant.
The abandonment of
The abandonment of the Shoreham. Economically, it's devastated us. And environmentally, it's resulted in much more in the way of air pollution going to Long Island. It's resulted in far greater dependence on foreign oil. It's increased the number of, the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted to the atmosphere, and it's their contribution to climate change. So, I mean, if you look at that and you trace that through the entire economic and environmental envelope that represents Long Island, it's probably the most devastating thing that ever took place.
Rip is one of the most unusual people I've ever met, for one thing. And I've met some interesting and unusual people, luckily, in my life. And one of the smartest. But one of the simplest. He's not a wild-eyed, fear-mongering guy. But when Rip says, ocean acidification really, really scares me, I get scared. Because he's not going to do exaggeration. That's not the way he works. This is something the younger generation, my generation, great party, had peace marches and anti-Shoreham marches, and we had a lot of fun and everything. And we are handing a big, fat mess to the next generation. And I worry about my daughter and son-in-law. If they have a child, I worry about that child. And my friends' children. It's very serious. So when you understand what's at stake, then nuclear power makes a whole lot of sense. No one's going to give up electricity. Yes, we can have more efficient refrigerators. Do it. Yes, we can have better insulated homes. Do it. But as long as we keep burning diesel here on Long Island to run the air conditioners in the summer, as long as those coal-fired plants are smoking away, and even gas, people say, oh, natural gas is cleaner, it's still putting out carbon. And it's still going into the ocean. Never mind just warming up the whole planet.
And that's been a very interesting journey.
It's that you're doing kind of what I did. In fact, you start, because I would look up something, people like Harvey Wasserman just put out this stuff that's not true. I don't know if they may believe it. I don't really get, according to Patrick Moore, there's a lot of cynicism at the top levels of Greenpeace. Because if you scare people, they send you money. I mean, I earnestly believe that nuclear power was bad. So no one was paying me to think that. I just believe that because I've been scared by the UK head of Greenpeace is someone named Stephen Tyndale.
Tyndale, okay.
He recently became a nuclear convert.
Did he?
Yeah, because he's worried about global warming. And he just did the math. He said, okay, what are the cleanest sources of electricity in the world? Let's enhance them. Well, nuclear. Oh, but we're against nuclear. He did his homework, and he left Greenpeace, and now he's supporting nuclear power.
Well, you said that was the final question. Was there anything else that you wanted to add or address, or any criticisms made by the anti-nuclear side that you wanted to just clear the air of before we say goodbye?
Clear the air, so to speak.
Maybe the bad choice of words.
All I want to say is if you're really serious about cleaning the air, cleaning the water, you need to learn more about nuclear power. And Grossman denigrated everybody who is a professional as if we're, just trying to protect our jobs. Well, I chose this profession. I don't want to sound vain, but I'm a reasonably smart guy. National Merit Scholar, top of my class in high school, went to the Naval Academy, did well at the Naval Academy. I've learned lots of things. My master's degree is in systems technology for computers. I could work almost any place, and I haven't been employed by the nuclear industry yet. As a matter of fact, I still make a living by serving my country. I'm still a professional naval officer. I like the technology because I know about the technology. I've studied it. I've met the people who are responsible for the plants. Some of the best, brightest, hardest working folks you can imagine
are in the nuclear industry. Some very family-oriented folks live very close to the plants. They raise their families there. They want their children to go work in the plants. Now, these people aren't brainwashed. They aren't dumb. They're really bright. Some of them are pretty quiet, both because they're engineers or because they come out of the silent service. Not all of us have the gift of gab. Not all of us want to go and make our money on the college lecture circuit fighting against something that we think is pretty good. And some of them don't want to spend a lot of time trying to explain to people who aren't willing to take the time themselves. Nukes sometimes are a little vain. They're a little bit cocky about what they know, and they don't always share it very well. So my advice to anybody who is concerned is learn. Don't just listen to folks that make a living or have, invested their entire credibility in being opposed to nuclear power.
Mm-hmm. We certainly appreciate your time, Mr. Adams. Thank you very much.